I'd like you to do today first, so that we can begin working on a reboot character, is to open up a browser. If you have Lightwave open, if you want to hide everything temporarily, if you hit the F11 key, and if the settings are right, it should temporarily just put everything aside. And then go ahead and open Safari or Firefox or whatever browser you're in. And then we're going to go to Google. So we're going to do a Google search. And what we're going to do in here, I want to make sure that I have images selected and type in reboot. And also after that, maybe a space and put in mic. We're going to do the mic character. Okay. And you'll notice that there are a variety of them. The one that I've been using is this one right here. One of these two. This one would work too, but this one would have. And you just click on it, and you say, see full size. So this is the character we're going to build together. Okay. And we're just going to use primitives to build it. Okay. Now, to download this, if you're not sure how to do that, pull down the control key. And you can say save image to downloads. You can just put, I would instead put save image as and make sure that it's saved on your flash drive and put it in the image folder. Okay. You can also right click and you get to the same place, save image as. Permit you to download it. So everybody find that okay? The next step would be, if you wanted to, you could trim this image in Photoshop, but it's really not necessary right now. So I'm going to go ahead and hide or close the browser, and I'm going to come back to model, because that's where we're going to start. And one of the things you can do in model is you can bring in images and place them in the background to use them as a template or as a guide to build your model for proportions. So what I want to do is I want to put it in the back view, just so I can get a sense of proportions. I'm going to follow it exactly, but it'll give me a good idea of proportions. Maybe instead of back view, I'm going to switch and make it my front view instead. So as long as this in the lower left-hand corner is front or back, you're safe. And the one in the lower right, the corner is right or left, you're good. And the one in the upper left-hand corner, as long as it's top or bottom view, you're safe. And then we always have perspective view in the upper right-hand corner. I just think that works well for now. And when you want to use other formats or other layouts later on, that's just fine by me. So, to be able to put an image in the background, this is what you do. You hit D for display, and it brings up our display options. What we want to do is the backdrop. Notice it's the third tab, the one in the middle. Okay. Notice which viewport it's specifying. We have TL for top left, TR for top right, BL for bottom left, BR for bottom right. So you can put a separate background image in each viewport if you wish. I want the bottom left. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the image. Right now none should be selected. And I'll load image. And wherever you save that image, I happen to have one on my desktop. And here is Mike TGA. Now, if yours doesn't open, I need to know. Lightwave does have problems once in a while with different file formats. If it does not open, then what you will have to do is open that image in Photoshop and save it as a TGA file. which is Targa. You can also save it as a JPEG if that's not what it is, or maybe a GIF or something else, and that will enable you to load it. Any luck? Yes? Huh?
Mine didn't open.
Won't open? Okay, then let's go back. Let's do it this way. Okay, here's my mic image. Actually, I'm going to pick this one. And I'm going to open it in Photoshop. If you don't have Photoshop open, you have documents here. I'm not sure on your computer, but go into the Applications folder. Open Adobe Photoshop. Oh, we have CS4 on here now. Okay, cool. I'll open it from here then. I'm going to go ahead and open Adobe Photoshop CS4. I hope we have it open next door. That's what I'm teaching. And then we're going to open the file. So what I can do is hide some of these and hit F11 again, and you'll see I have mic. A quick way of opening it is if you just click and drag directly on that open icon, it will launch it in Photoshop. And there it is, it's open in Photoshop. It is a GIF or a GIF, depending on how you want to pronounce it. So what I'll do is do a file, save as, and if you want to save it as a copy, we can, it doesn't matter. And the format, if you don't see this information below, you click on this little button right here to the right of the name. And I want to make sure that I see, I'm going to save it as a Targa file. Targa is TGA. And I don't need copy. I'm going to go ahead and save it as mic.tga. Targa files are the files used most often with Lightweight. And go ahead and just make sure that it's saved on the desktop, or preferably in your image folder. No? Having a problem?
I have it open on Adobe, but I think I missed it.
You have it open in Photoshop 3?
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. Then File, Save As. Okay? Okay. So now you have it saved. And then the step to bring it in is as follows. So repeat that. When you're in Lightweight, make sure that we're in Lightweight. I'm going to go ahead and close Photoshop. I don't need it anymore. Hit D. D is in dog. And that brings up display options. Click on the middle tab for backdrop. Select VL for bottom left. And then under image, you select load image, and then wherever you have that image saved, select that image. And as long as it's a TGA file, it should open just fine. And you'll see it appear in the lower left-hand corner. And that's all the bigger we need it. We don't need to make it any bigger, because remember, scale is, each one of these grid units represents a meter right now. So it doesn't need to be any bigger than what we see it. You can hit A or to fit, or we can zoom in, and it appears big. Okay. Does everybody have all the tools, or almost all of the tools? Does everybody remember? If you don't, how you can make sure that you have plugins, all the plugins selected so that they will be loaded. For right now, I'm just going to use the box. And this isn't going to look exactly like Reboot character. There's some things that they have done. They're a little bit more sophisticated, but we're going to get there just the same. This will be fine. Is everybody with me so far? Because I want to make sure that we are doing this together. So I'll try to slow down.
It doesn't want to open up on this one.
Even though it's a TGA?
Yeah.
Okay, let me take a look. Let's see.
See for the slide. Click on that one. Bottom one. Okay. Did you say, you have to say this, I don't see where I'm going to stop it. Is it your name?
Mm-hmm.
It's in my, Make sure that this goes in this folder. Okay. Okay, so we're having problems. Go back and save it as a JPEG and try it as a JPEG. If the TGA doesn't work, try a JPEG. Sometimes, for whatever reason, that is one of the glitches with Lightwave. Sometimes when you want a JPEG to open up, it doesn't, and use it as a surface. And other times, you know, it does work. I don't know. The same with TGA files. TGA files should work always, and they don't. I don't get that. Huh? Say one more time. You have to go back into display to resize it, but if you click from here, all you're doing is zooming in. Does everybody understand that? I'm not resizing this, I'm only zooming in using the zoom tool here. It doesn't need to be any bigger than it is on your screen. Okay, so let's begin. I'm going to start by building, if everybody has this now, I'm going to start by building the head. And even if you don't have the image in the background, go ahead and open, make sure that Lightwave is open and we'll go. Okay. So I'll start with the box, and this time I'm going to start from the front view. So click and drag like so. And notice that I have the approximate dimensions. You know, approximate width, approximate height. And you look from the top view and you see that it's just a flat two-dimensional plane, don't you? Now I can click and drag and I can pull this back. And those are about the proportions of a TV monitor. You know, I don't have another photograph from him from the side, so I don't know how deep it is. I'm guessing. But before I select or deselect this to say my box is done, I have some other options available to me, which are really very nice. So I'm going to look in perspective view. Notice that my box here is going to be the television monitor. Has very crisp, sharp edges, doesn't it? Perfect edges. You look confused. Don't have it?
I want to know how you do the reading, but I can't.
Remember, you pull on a widget to pull it out. So, and how far back, the depth, I have it 200 millimeters. If yours is 150, if it's 300, I don't know. Proportions are just that. I mean, if they look right, they're right, basically. Now where I want you to look is down below here. Make sure that you have your numerical cluster up, and you'll notice that we have something called a radius. Because if you look at the monitor here, or Mike's head, that the edges of this are rounded, aren't they? So what we can do here is I can go ahead and use the spinner and watch when I go ahead and I click and I drag to the right. Notice that it starts by making the edge really chiseled. But you'll also notice that there's only one radius segment. If I change the number of segments,
and I hit the spinner here, watch what happens. If I move it up to maybe 8 segments, look at how nice and rounded that is. So now what I've been able to do is actually round the corners of the box without, and add significant amount of geometry without really doing much. I'm still using the basic tool, but that added feature is only available if you have the numeric request to it.
Sure, I did.
The radius maybe 30 millimeters. You see where I'm pointing right here? You add the radius, and by default, it makes a chiseled edge. In order to make a rounded edge, you need to change and add the number of radius segments. And when you scroll up or you put it, or hit the little, the button to the right, and click and drag left and right, you can add or subtract the number of segments, make it look more rounded, less rounded. And for me, 8 looks pretty good. How do I know it's 8? I don't know, because it looks pretty good. You could add a lot more, and it will be really, really smooth, but I just don't need that much geometry. Okay. So, I'm close. I'm getting there. I'm looking at the picture, and when it looks about the same thickness, and that's about it. Again, it's looking at existing images, or if you don't have an existing image, if you're making it up, then you have to use your sensibility to determine, is that proportion right? That's all I can say. If it looks right, it's right.
Later on in the layout program, if you hit the smoothing checkbox, will it smooth that out?
Somewhat. You have to, I mean, it's a good question, because smoothing, you can either do it in modeler or layout, but it's done when you apply a surface to the object, and you can check smoothing. It will smooth basic geometry out considerably. But it really depends, you know, what you're going to do with the object. If, for example, let's say we're going to make a sphere, and that sphere is going to be the planet Mars, and you're going to have a really close-up view of it. You probably want a lot of geometry because you don't want to see those facets. You know, if you're going to have a nice close-up tight shot of it. So you'll probably want to increase it and see it close and make sure that it's smooth even without smoothing turned on. When you start to add surface textures and stuff, and you want to make it look like it's bumpy and it's the red terrain, the rocks and everything. On the other hand, what if it's just a little ball that's in the back of your scene, somewhere sitting on the floor in the back that you barely see? Then turn the geometry way down, because it will only add the rendering time, it will only, you know, it's just unnecessary to add all that. So then you'll turn it down. How much is enough, how much is not, that's never talked about. You'll just sort of get a feel for it, and I'm probably wrong sometimes, so probably a lot of times. You know, it's just something you kind of get a feel for.
I only got the top one shaved off, the bottom one still black.
Make sure that when you select radius and segments, it's all of them. You don't need to add any segments right now for the X, Y, or Z. This will be something different. It's only the segments. You don't see the bottom rounded either. It should, when you add radius, it should add a radius to all of the edges on your box. And then when you're done with it, just turn it off, and now it's fixed.
Radius segments 8.
Huh?
The radius segments supposed to be 8.
Right.
I see. I only have
It
1.
doesn't have to be 8. If it's more, that's fine. If it's a little bit less, that's fine. I'm only, you know, I mean, I'm guessing. If it looks right, and I don't have smoothing turned on, it looks nice and smooth. That looks good 8's a nice number. I don't know, it's a nice even number. Okay. Now, we're gonna use a more advanced, yeah.
When I increase the number of radius segments.
If it doesn't do anything, then don't use them. If you increase the number of radius segments, it won't, and you don't see a difference. Have you added the radius first? You have to add a radius for the radius. Okay. Let's crank that up a little bit. Now you see, maybe if you want to leave it 9, that's good. I'll leave it 9. So yours doesn't have to be exactly what you want. It's all, you know, if it looks right, it looks okay. Yeah. Oh. I don't think they have a right. They just installed this, so I'm sure there's glitches. Okay. So now we're going to begin to add additional geometry to this. And this is a little bit more advanced technique, but it's worth talking about now, I think, so get a sense of building. It's similar to what we'll do when you do more organic modeling. Now, one of the things that I can do, and it's not a bad idea, remember I said, when you have something completed, or you have it at a certain point, you want to add a placeholder, right? So I could make this Mike's head or something like that, I don't know. Or I know that this is going to look like brass or gold or something like that, so I could just name it brass. So that wouldn't be a bad idea. So I hit Q, make sure the default is turned off, and I'll name it brass, B-R-A-S-S. And I'll make it sort of a yellowish, goldish color, orangish color. That's really good enough for right now. The next thing that I want to do, if I look at the picture, is I need to be thinking about his face or the screen part of this. Okay? So this is how I'm going to build it. And I suggest you just watch, and then we'll work from there. I'm going to go ahead, yeah.
Make it color, it's not, it doesn't give you the option to change the color.
Did you click Q
Yeah.
and you deselected default and you typed in brass and you clicked on the color wheel and
There's no color wheel.
the little button to get the color picker? Click on there. It says control is disabled. Have you already named it brass?
No.
He doesn't like that. So, that's a good question. I don't know what to do.
So you just make a box.
Okay, then let's do that. Let's go to Surface Editor. Let's look at brass. And let's click from here. And let's make it orange. There we go. So something happened. You also have some other unnamed objects that are open right now. And that might be part of the problem. You can't, the other surfaces, you can't. That's a weird thing with Lightwave. When you start naming surfaces and you're part of a project, you can't delete them. I don't know why. You can rename them, but you can't delete them. Very bizarre. So, this is version, I mean, we're using version 8, but even in version So, now I'm ready to edit the monitor or the face. And I'm going to build the face. And I will try my best to think out loud so you understand the logic that I'm using here. You'll notice if instead of texture, I can texture wire. And this shows me, in perspective, all of these little squares in here are all the separate polygons that make up this object. If at the bottom, instead of points, I have polygons selected, I can select one of the front polygons, just one, and that's it. Okay?
Can you repeat again?
Huh?
Can you repeat again?
Yeah, deselect. At the bottom, instead of points, make sure that you have polygons selected. Move up to layout for the perspective view and click on the front polygon. So just that one polygon is selected. That's the only one I want to edit. What I'm going to do is add geometry to this. So just watch. Whatever I do to this, I want to make sure when I resize it, when I move it or whatever, I want it to be moved from the center of the selection. So I need to make sure down here in modes, its action center is selection. Not my mouse, and not the origin or the pivot point or anything, or it'll get goofed up. What I recommend that you do is try some of those other selection modes and try what I'm doing, and you'll notice that it's going to go goofy. So for example, I'll do this once because I don't want to use up too much of my video time. If I say action center and center of mouse, and I go to modify, and I select size, and I click from here, notice that it's resizing it based on where my mouse was. That's not what I want. If I hit Command Z to undo, and I change the mode to action center, center of selection, and I leave my mouse right where it's at, and I resize it. Notice it resizes it from the center. This is how I want this resized, but I'm not quite there yet. I don't want to resize it. I want to actually add geometry. Okay? This is how you do it. It's found under multiply, and you will be using this tool a lot. It's the bevel tool, B for bevel. Another similar tool will be smooth shift. The bevel tool is used most often when you're think of it, for right now, because I only have one polygon selected, the bevel tool is the one that I want. I can use the bevel tool when I have multiple polygons selected, as can I use smooth shift for multiple polygons, but it's different. You get a different effect. And we will cover that later. But for right now, just trust me, the bevel tool is what we want. So, to add geometry to this, and it doesn't look like I'm doing anything. All I have to do, I can select any port, and all I have to do is just click. And I've added geometry. It doesn't look like I've done anything, but I'm going to switch from bevel to size, go back to modify, and select size, and now watch what happens when I resize this. Notice how there's 4 additional polygons? Okay, watch, let me undo twice. If I use the size tool now and I resize it, notice how, notice how it's pulling the corners in. You see that? And if I hit T for move, and I move this out, see what's happening, how it pulls these corners in? This is the geometry from the corner. That's not what I want. I have to add a little bit of geometry in order to do this. So I'm going to undo, Command Z, Command Z. going to go ahead and hit V for bevel and just click. And that has added geometry. Now watch what happens when I go ahead and I hit size or Shift H. It doesn't matter which port I'm using, I go ahead and I resize it. Now notice the difference. It's not pulling from the corner anymore, is it? I've added geometry and I see a little bit of extra geometry here, so that works pretty nicely for me. Now what I can also do is you'll notice here that if I look at the reboot character, there's a part of this that's actually set back. If you look at the monitor, it actually looks sort of concave. It looks like it's moved back. So I'm going to try right now, with this polygon selected, I'm going to try to move it back a little bit. So I hit T for move. And from the top view, I'm going to push it back a little bit. And notice now how it's indented. So notice how I'm building. I started with a simple primitive, a simple cube. I added rounded corners by using the numeric requester and added radius, added geometry so it's nice and round, and then selected one polygon on the front, and by hitting the bevel tool I was able to add geometry, resize it, move it a little bit, and look at how I've changed the configuration of that cube in just a few short moves. Huh? You just hit V for bevel and you click, and that's it. It doesn't look like it's done anything, but it adds geometry when you do that.
And then when I move them, how do you get it to move towards the center instead of up?
You make sure the mode at the bottom is selection center. Center of selection. Mode, action center, selection. This makes a huge difference. Okay?
And then after you resize it?
What's that?
After you resize it?
Yeah. Now, there's something else that I can do too, that you might think about. That what I'm doing at the moment is I'm building the interior of the screen. But then what happens, what about the actual glass part of the monitor in front of it? I forgot about that, didn't I? So let me undo a couple steps. Now what I can do, because remember, when you copy and paste, you can copy and paste elements, and it remembers the exact size and placement, can it? So what I'll do with this particular, this is going to be my glass screen that's going to go on top. So what I'll do is I'm going to hit Command C for copy. I'm going to click on another layer, and I'm going to hit Command V for paste. And there, look what I've done. Just copied that one particular piece. When I come back over here, and it's not like this part is gone. I've actually added geometry, or copied a part of it. So now I'm going to go back again with, I don't want move selected. I'm going to go ahead and select this again, and I'm going to repeat the same steps so you guys can do it again. I select a polygon, make sure at the bottom under mode that action center selection is selected. Hit V for bevel, and just click anywhere except on the object. Just click. One click with the left mouse button. That's added geometry. Now I need to resize, and I'll go ahead, and it doesn't matter what viewport, and I'll move it in a little bit. And you'll notice this is how it should resize. You'll notice if you look at the right view, notice how it's staying right along that plane. It's not moving out or in, it's staying perfectly centered. It looks pretty good. Right. Now I'm ready to make that look inset, make it pushed back a little bit so that you see it just as you see here, that this part is inset a little bit. So I'm going to hit T for move, and from the top view, I'm going to move it back just a little bit. So, to make it look deep. And again, it's not exactly like the one that we have, you know, the reboot character, but it gets us in the ballpark. We've already started to use some fairly complex tools or procedures. Now you'll notice that this part of the screen back here is concave, isn't it? So how do I make that rounded? We're going to start to use some modification tools now in order to make it rounded. But in order to do that, we have to add geometry to that plane. Because, think of it this way, if you have a solid piece of anything, plastic, but let's think of metal. If you try to bend it, it's kind of hard, isn't it? But if you, into a nice, smooth, curved surface. But think about a screen, a kind of mesh that you have, that you would use for windows, window screens that you put to keep flies and bugs out and that sort of thing. Think of that piece of metal. If it were sliced up and you added the geometry in a grid like that, and it will become more flexible and pliable, wouldn't it? So that's what we're going to do to this. We're going to add geometry to it. So that we're going to create from that single polygon a nice tight mesh so that it will allow us to use a modify tool to actually make it bend and curve. Okay, so again, to do that, if I keep that one polygon selected, what I can do now is if I look to multiply, that's the third tab. What I want to do is I want it to divide. Now watch what happens when I click divide. It says no edges. Oh, wait a minute, sorry, wrong thing here. Subdivide, never mind. Subdivide. Faceted, I'm going to go ahead and just faceted is fine. And notice how it took that one polygon and it subdivided into 4. I'm going to do the same again and again and again, and it will keep subdividing it until I get a nice, smooth, tight mesh. Subdivide. Subdivide. See how it's getting finer and finer, like a fine mesh screen? I'm going to do that one more time. Really, really tight mesh. Now, one more thing that I probably should do so that I don't, remember how we were talking about non-planars the other day? In order to avoid non-planars, the best thing to do is to triple. So what I can do is if I click right here, triple, or Shift T, it will take all of those square polygons and it will cut them in half diagonally. So now I have just 3-pointed polygons. So when I bend this, I will not have any non-planars. I won't have any non-planars. So now when I click the triple, when you zoom in, you look, see how they're all subdivided? And you see these little square rectangles, but within each rectangle, they're subdivided diagonally. Now I'm ready to bend this, to curve it, to work, so that it looks concave. And again, I want to look from the right view, from the front view, from the top view, from the perspective view to make sure that this works. So we're going to begin to use our modification tools, and these are really, really cool. Some of these are really, really nice. Okay. I can never remember which one, the magnet or the dragnet tool. I think the magnet tool. So again, just watch, and you'll see what I'm going to over here, in the numeric magic, the magic tool, or magnet tool, that we have some fall-offs. I have radial, but if I curve like so, you'll notice that it will be a nice smooth parabola, a nice smooth rounded arc. This will mean nothing to you right now, but when we start to build other parts of mine, it will be, these fall-offs will be really, really critical. Now, in order to, what they are, for those of you who have worked with animation, they're similar to weight minutes. So now what I can do is I can right-click, and watch what happens. I right-click, notice it brings out a nice round widget. And then I can right-click again from the front view, and right-click to move it, and you'll notice that I have, if you look at each view, it's actually, if you can imagine, this is kind of like a disc, three-dimensional disc. I want to make sure that it's big enough to encompass the whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click and make this a little deeper. I'm going to right-click and move from here. Right-click to make this a little wider. Right-click to make this a little bit bigger here, so that it just encompasses the whole thing. Right-click and move it in place. I'm looking at all three viewports. Now watch what happens when I left-click and I move it back. Notice how it's bowing backwards? Look in the perspective viewport. See how it's curved? Now, how much you can curve this is questionable. It will start to get really distorted after a while. But I think for right now, what I have isn't half bad. I'll leave it this way for the moment. One last thing that I need to do before I change this, notice that the background of that is kind of a blue, isn't it? So now I can change the surface quality of this. I'll hit Q. We'll name it screen. Click on the little butt widget. We'll make it a nice blue. Click OK, and it turns it blue. Now I can deselect, turn off the magnet tool. I can deselect. And let's look at this just in texture view so you can see how it changes. Now I still, notice this border right here, this black border, it still needs to be black, doesn't it? So I'm going to select this polygon, hold down the shift key, select this polygon, hold down the shift key, select that one and that one, hit Q again. Let's name this frame. Click here, let's make it black. Click OK, and it's turned black. So now all of this is comprised of one object, and one object alone. If I want, and what I will do for today, I'm going to do one more step to build the screen on the front, because remember, I still have that over here, don't I? Yeah,
I have a problem. I can deselect the.
I'm sorry,
I
say
can
again.
deselect the. Can deselect begin.
What do you, I don't know what
Um,
you mean. I gotta see.
How do you deselect so you can see?
Oh, just click here. Uh-huh. Now, I would undo and do it again, because see how it's pushed over? So you want to check each view as you're distorting it and make sure that it moves back equally. Just hit Command Z to undo, undo, undo. Command Z. Apple Z. There you go. This got pushed over. This needs to be moved over that way a little bit, probably. So hit T for move and move it over a little bit. There you go. See how it got? You have to keep your eye on every view as you're building it.
What do we do to make the black?
I simply deselected everything. Then I selected, making sure I had polygons selected. I clicked on each individual polygon that made that frame. And then I hit Q, named it frame, or whatever you want to call it, border. Gave it a different color, clicked OK, and it turns that. Because for every polygon that you have, it can be a different surface. And then moved over to the lower left-hand corner and clicked to click off of it. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to build a screen. And I already have the screen because I copied that first plane, didn't I? If I click over here and I click here, see, that's my screen. But the screen bows outward, doesn't it? Or it should. You know, to make it look like an old-time kind of monitor. You know how the glass bows out a little bit? I mean, these are nice and flat. We're not talking about the new Vizio or the new, thin flat screen TVs. We're talking about the old days, kind of a retro look, where everything is kind of rounded and blobby. So just as we bent the interior part of the screen inward, we're going to add geometry to this one, and we're going to use that tool to bend it and that mesh outward. And then we're going to change the surface of it, and we'll add transparency to it so we will be able to see it. Meaning as a piece of glass, as it were.
Where do you find the selection tool? The selection.
What do you mean?
Just if you want to choose a polygon.
Oh, make sure that nothing is selected, and then you make sure that polygons are selected here, and then select on wherever there's a polygon. And that's the only polygon in this layer. That is your selection tool.
Because I have the magnet tool.
Turn that off. Turn off the magnet tool. Because what the magnet tool will want to do is, remember, if nothing is selected, it thinks everything is selected. That's kind of an important rule to remember. If nothing is selected, then everything is selected. So since I have this piece on a separate layer, I really don't need to worry about it. I have everything else in the background, don't I? So now I'm ready to bend this. In order to bend it, I need to subdivide it multiple times, triple it, so that I get a nice triangulated group of polygons. And then I can use the magnet tool to bend it. So watch again. This will be similar to what I did with the back, but I'm going to move forward. So under multiply, I'm going to go ahead and select subdivide. Faceted is just fine. And because in textured view, I should select textured wires so you can see it, how it divides. And I'm just going to go ahead and do that again. Subdivide, subdivides again, subdivide again. So I get a nice tight mesh. Think of it this way. If I only subdivide it once or twice, and I try to bend it, it would be like having, again, a piece of metal or an object with a few hinges in it, and it looks pretty crude. The more hinges you have on it, the more pliable it becomes. The smoother mesh, the smoother curve you can generate. So again, that looks pretty good. It's pretty tight mesh. Maybe one more time for good measure, I suppose. No, that's kind of overboard. Now I'll go ahead and I'll triple it. And now I can go ahead and I can bend this. So to bend it, in And again, I need to look at each view to make sure that what I'm doing is symmetrical. So I need to go to Modify, select the Magnet tool, and again, under Magnet, make sure that I have radial fall off here. Yes.
Are we following along there?
You don't have to, no, because some of you haven't finished the table and lamp, and I'm going to probably repeat a good part of this on Monday. Okay, and I remember I'll have this in video too. So, because if you get lost, and that doesn't help, you're going to have to decide, you know, you can keep up in certain parts fine. If you find that you're falling behind, fine, you can watch the video and then tell me on Monday, these things I need repeated, and it's fine by me. I'm trying to gauge, you know, where everybody is in here, how fast or slow I can go, make sure I get the maximum amount of information on my video, and so on and so forth. So now what I'm going to do is with the Magnet tool, I right-click in order to bring out that widget. Right-click from the front view in order to expand it. Right-click to move it, like so. And now I'm going to left-click, pull it out. And this isn't going to work for me. Can you see why it's not going to work?
Stick it out.
Huh?
Stick it out like.
Because you can see the edges. I had hoped that this would work, and it's not going to work for me. But there's another thing that I can do. So this is a good example of, oh, Kirk, I forgot how I was going to do this. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So that's just not going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and undo. I'm going to turn off the tool. I'm going to go back to my front layer, and let's see what we can do here. I'm going to go back. I'm going to zoom in from here. And what I want to do is I'm going to build a new polygon, and I hope I get this right. I'm going to switch to points, and I'm going to click from the corner, and that's not going to help me. What to do, what to do. Let me try to select. This is going to be really, really tough. Maybe I should switch from texture to wireframe. And let's move this so I can see the corners pretty well here. I sort of messed up. Sort of. We'll see. Because I just want to select this corner point. See it? That's the only one I want. So I'm going to do that from the other view over here. Remember, to turn this into a polygon, that's what I'm going to do. Remember, I have to select how? Clockwise and or counterclockwise, don't I? So I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Shift key and select that point. And that didn't work. See, I'm making a mess of it. Just wanted that one. Now, do I still have the other one selected? Yep. Come down to the corner. This is kind of awkward. I'm trying to backpedal here and make make myself look good. So go ahead and unclick this one. And now I'm going to move over and select this one. And now I want to see this from the front view. So I move it back around and zoom out a little bit. Now let's switch back to texture view. Whoops. Texture view. Now with all those 4 points selected, how do I turn that into a polygon? P for poly, right? Just made a polygon on top. And it is attached to everything. Now I'm hopeful, I'm going to try this again, that by doing that it will be attached to everything. So I need to deselect the points because now I'm going to switch back to poly. And I have one polygon selected. So I'll go back to multiply and I'll select subdivide. just repeat what I had done before. To see if this works or doesn't work, I can probably try it now. I'll just go ahead and do it. I'm pretty sure it will work. I'm going to subdivide several times. And now I'm going to triple it. And now I'm ready to use the magnet tool. Make sure in the numeric requester that radial fall off is selected, that I get this nice smooth parabolic arc. So it helps me get a nice smooth curve. And I right click to pull out the widget, which will determine how much or where the fall off occurs from the front view. Right click to move it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and bend this outward now with the left mouse to see what I get. And notice how it sticks to the rest of the stuff. See how it's nice, it's attached now. So I redeemed myself. So this looks pretty good. You know, not perfect, but it's all right. I can go ahead and I want to make sure that this is pretty symmetrical. So I'm going to move this over just a little bit. See how I'm looking from the top view, I'm looking from the side view. Looking, I should probably from the front view, move that over just a little. Make sure that it's nice and even and symmetrical. And not bowed one to one side or another, or tweaked or distorted. Okay, now one more thing I need to do. Because I have this the way I want it, I can now turn this into another surface. It's easier to do this now because to select all these separate polygons would be a real pain, wouldn't it? To have to select them later on. Another point in the class, one of the things that we'll do too is we can take all of these polygons and you can turn them into parts so that later on it's easier to select groups later on. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Q. And I want this to be glass, because that's going to be the texture I'm going to use. And glass in fact, is or can be different colors. It's typically kind of a bluish color, smoky kind of gray color, or a greenish color. In some glass, you may see old glass can be cobalt blue. You know, there's some really pretty glasses, different kinds, but even glass that you see, if you look at this glass here, it's not perfectly transparent. I mean, it is transparent, but it does have a color to it. You know, look at all glass in different kinds of windows in your car, in your house and stuff, and there actually is a little tint to it. So I'll go ahead and I'll click OK. And click OK. Now I'm going to bring up the surface editor. Make sure that I have glass selected, and so that I can see through this, I'll go ahead here where it says transparency, and let's go ahead and crank that up to maybe, you know, 50, just 60% right now, so I can see through it, and see how I can see through there, and I can see all the interior parts. So look at how, you know, I could have tried to build this part by part by part by piece and put it together. They could all be independent, separate elements. But to try to join them all and to make sure that they're all the right size and everything would be a real pain. So as I'm building this, I'm thinking to myself, how can I add geometry? How can I bend geometry? How can I distort it or do what I need to do? And then if this is going to be a different surface, try to remember that at the same time. And then go ahead and make that a different surface so I can select it at any time in the future. When it'll make it easier. So now that I'm done changing it, go ahead and turn that off, and you'll notice, you'll see I have my monitor and TV screen. If I want to make these parts glass too, I could do that, or I could leave it metal, or I could make it some other part. That's all I wanted to cover today. And we're going to start to do some bend tools, more modification tools on another day. How many of you have finished your table and lamp? That's what I thought. So don't worry about this. I will repeat this again, and I will have the video up before the next couple of days, so you can watch it again and see what I've done. Okay? It's more important that you get the table and lamp done and feel comfortable with just working with some of the primitives, sending those objects over to layout, applying some of the preset surfaces, adjust the lighting a little bit, render it so that it looks pretty decent, and send me a copy so that you feel comfortable with the procedure. What I have shown you here, when you look at it, looks pretty simple and pretty basic, but what we've done is we've done something fairly complex. Okay? But I think if you start to get into the mode now of thinking this way, and I'm trying to think out loud, that as you're building objects, you're going to start thinking about that. You're going to say, well, gee, this looks like a cylinder. Well, it's sort of a flat cylinder. So if I build a cylinder first and I add some mesh to it, that will add geometry. Now I can flatten it, and then I can use a bend tool to make it, I can bend it. Well, I want to control the bend. Oh, okay, I need to bring out some of these other widgets in order to control the bend. You know, you're thinking all the while. And then as you do that, gee, do I need to add surface? Do I need to change this as a surface? What do I need to do to this? Now, so sometimes you can pre-plan, and you know it's formulaic. It's like looking at a cookbook. These are the steps I need to take. At other times, you're going to look at an object and you're going to, just through trial and error, through your, based on your experience, you're going to try to build it using what you know. And like I did with my screen, I had to backtrack. I thought I was being smart and saving it on a separate layer, but when I tried to bend it, you could see the corners that were bowed out. And I thought, well, that's not going to work. I'll leave that there, and then I'll delete it. I need to go back and I need to create a separate polygon on there, and I'll bend that one forward. And that happened to work. I mean, it looks decent at the moment. It looks okay. When it renders, who knows? Maybe it won't look so good, so maybe I need to rethink it. But you get the basic idea of how I'm working here. I mean, maybe I need to select these, or maybe this is too small. This is okay. This is a little bit bigger than I had planned in here. But that's all right. Proportions aren't too bad. I guess the next thing that I should do before I turn off my video is to save it in my object folder, and we'll name it Reboot File. Save object as Mike, and go to my desktop, because that's where I have my current folder. Save it in objects, and I'll save it as Mike. Okay? So if you need to take a break, take 10, 15 minutes, come back, work on the table and lamp. If you're already done with the table and lamp, then try to redo some of the steps that I've done today. And if you're lost, and ask for my help.